damage control efforts after a debate in which Biden has acknowledged to donors that he performed poorly. Happening in the next hour, a source tells NBC News that the White House Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients, will hold a call to tell the full White House staff to, quote, keep their heads down and weather the political storm. And moments ago, we learned the Biden campaign sent an all-staff memo this morning saying they expect new polling today, which, quote, is likely to show a slightly larger swing in the race. President Biden also spoke with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries last night after Congressman Lloyd Doggett of Texas became the first sitting Democrat to call on Biden to drop from the 2024 race. And a new poll by Reuters and Ipsos out this morning, conducted after the debate, found that 1 in 3 Democrats now say President Biden should end his campaign, and 60% of the independents say the same. Joining us now, NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen, Leanne Caldwell, who's the co-author of the Early Brief newsletter and anchor at the Washington Post, and Basil Smikle, the former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party. He's now a professor at Columbia University and an MSNBC political analyst. Also joining us, Stuart Stevens, former chief strategist for Mitt Romney's 2012 campaign. He's also a senior advisor to the Lincoln Project. So we've got a lot to talk about. I'm glad to have you all here. Jonathan, let's start with you. You actually have some new reporting about how the DNC could respond to these questions surrounding Biden's candidacy. What are you learning?
Yeah, Ryan, we got our hands on a talking points document that the DNC is circulating, which basically says that only Joe Biden could be the nominee of the Democratic Party. Talks about how the delegates were elected to nominate him and how they will go through that process to do so. But what it doesn't talk about is a rule in the Democratic Convention rules for how a candidate is replaced once they are nominated. And in that process, and we've reported on this a little bit before at NBC, but I think it's becoming more important at the moment. If Joe Biden were to receive the nomination and then step aside, this rule is in place that says that the chairman of the DNC, in consultation with congressional leaders and the head of the DGA, so Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and Tim Walz, the Minnesota governor, would make a recommendation to the full membership of the Democratic National Committee, which I should point out is different. It is a smaller, more elite set of Democratic leaders than the full convention delegates, but would make a recommendation on who a replacement should be. One of our sources said that the Biden team at the White House and on the campaign and at the DNC are trying to suggest that, quote unquote, chaos would reign if Biden were to step aside, but that this rule is in fact in place despite the fact that the DNC and the campaign don't want to point to it. All of which, Ryan, I should point out, leads to the conclusion that it would be almost impossible for anyone other than Kamala Harris to replace Joe Biden on a ballot if he were to step aside. And of course, he has said he is not going to do that.
Okay. Well, Leanne, let's talk about your reporting this morning from the Washington Post that President Obama is now privately telling allies that Biden's tough re-election campaign is growing more challenging. This is your paper's reporting. I mean, how significant is this?
Well, it's significant in the sense that there seems to be more and more people who are going a little bit further than they were over the weekend about President Biden. You had Nancy Pelosi on your airwaves yesterday going a little bit further, saying that there are questions that should be asked. You had Jim Clyburn also say yesterday that who evoked praise for Kamala Harris. Now, what this means, and then you also had other people like former Congressman Tim Ryan, who came out and said that Biden needs to step aside. Now, I'm told by a couple sources that the reason that people are doing this publicly and more in the media and inching closer to being a little bit more critical of President Biden and questioning the legitimacy of if he can run again is because there's fears that that they are unable to pierce the Biden bubble. There's fears that he is not hearing what he needs to hear because his staff and his family are keeping such a tight circle around him. And so they're taking some of their concerns public, Ryan.
So it's interesting, Stuart, when we talk about piercing the Biden bubble, he has a big meeting today with Democratic governors. Some of them are going to be actually here in Washington, D.C., so they'll see him face to face. Others will be joining virtually. If you were one of these governors, what would you be advising President Biden to do?
I would be advising President Biden to get out and campaign, do town halls, do interviews, do a 72-hour blitz of swing states, do midnight tarmac rallies at airports. You can't talk your way out of these kind of situations. You can only prove that you are capable of doing the job and that you're the best candidate. I don't really think a lot of people watched this debate going in saying that they were going to vote for Joe Biden and left the debate thinking that they were going to vote for Donald Trump. Donald Trump had an abysmal debate. I mean, he said crazy stuff, like most Americans were against Roe v. Wade. He said that there were states out there where it was legal to kill babies. This is just nuts as a bunny stuff, and they should be out there hammering Trump with this and use the Supreme Court ruling that gives him more power to raise the stakes in the election.
But Stuart, isn't that part of the problem? If President Biden isn't able to offer up that counterpoint, if he doesn't have the ability to draw that comparison, isn't that part of the reason that there seems to be some anxiety in Democratic circles?
Yeah, but I mean, look, at a certain level, isn't this kind of odd? We're questioning whether or not Joe Biden is capable of being president. Well, he is president. So then you're fair to ask, is he doing a good job? And he arguably has had the most successful first term since anybody since World War II. So it seems a little specious to say, okay, 90 minutes, we're going to throw out all this other information that we have of a wildly successful presidency under very difficult circumstances, given where the Republican Party is, and question whether or not he's capable of being president. I just don't understand it. I get that everybody likes the idea that somebody new would be good. That's always the case. We don't sell cars in America by saying just as good as last year. Something always has to be better. But this isn't fantasy football. It's deadly serious for the future of democracy. And I think that Democrats should rally around Joe Biden and get about the business of winning the race.
All right, so Basil, though, to Stuart's point that Joe Biden has this record of accomplishment, nothing has changed in terms of that from before the debate, from beyond the debate. But there have been new questions that have been raised about his lapses during the period of time, even from before the debate. The New York Times writing, quote, asked if one could imagine putting Mr. Biden in the same room with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. Today, a former U.S. official who helped prepare for the trip went silent for a while and then said, I just don't know. A former senior European official answered the same question by flatly saying no. So to Stuart's point, is he still up for the job? That's part of the conversation, along with whether or not he's up for the campaign, Basil.
Yeah, well, to Stuart's point, he's been doing the job, so let him do the job. And this is what angers me. Look, I'm a former state party ED. I may get in trouble for the things I'm about to say, but the reality is I hate this open casting call. It's angering. I can understand acknowledging that the president didn't have a good debate, but Democrats should be out there saying that on Joe Biden's worst day, he is orders of magnitude better than Donald Trump on his best day. Why is that not the sort of prevailing narrative that's coming out of that debate? And to Jonathan's point, look, the committee to fill vacancies, which exists, from when, if you're a city council member all the way to President of the United States, there are rules in place to find ways to replace individuals who decide that they can't run or don't run for whatever reason. But that in and of itself does create a certain level of consternation, I dare say chaos. But the reality is, if you're even going to have a conversation about who's next, if Kamala Harris, the sitting vice president, is not the first and last name out of your mouth, then tell me how you're going to get black voters to engage when you change the rules to accommodate someone other than her. So all of this conversation, to me, just stokes more chaos, more concern, more uncertainty among voters, and gives Donald Trump and his campaign an opening to say, look at what Democrats are doing. They don't have it together. Come support me instead. I mean, I just don't, strategically, I just don't understand it.
Well, Stuart, I want to tell you what Democrats are saying. Last hour, I spoke with Congressman Mike Quigley from Illinois, a strong Biden supporter. This is what he told me.
This is more than just a single night's problem. The fact is, you have to accept the voters where they are, not where you want them to be. There's not going to be another debate Candidate Trump's people are smart enough to, what was the Latin phrase we learned in law school, res ipsa loquitur, it speaks for itself. So there'll be very few opportunities for President Biden to convince the voters that it was a single night's issue.
So that is interesting, Stuart. I mean, this is a supporter of President Biden. His point is you have to accept the voters where they are, not where you want them to be. How would you respond to that?
I mean, he's just absolutely wrong that there's not going to be other opportunities. For heaven's sakes, it's July 3rd. This election is in November. There's going to be hundreds of opportunities for him to show Americans that he's up to this job and to take Donald Trump's head off. I just don't get this. You know, in the history of America, no presidential race has been decided at this time in the cycle. It just doesn't happen. You have candidates like Bill Clinton he was running third this time in 1992. I think the fundamentals of this race are the same. And to me, to go to Basil's point, so Trump is a candidate of chaos, unpredictability, of frightening possibilities. To contrast that, the Democratic Party needs to be stable, predictable, reliable, safe. That's the contrast that wins this race. And this is a kind of Aaron Sorkin West Wing fantasy that you can come in and you can pick some different candidate after millions and millions of people voted for one candidate, but not, had a bad night, so we're going to go with another person. I don't know. I just think it's kind of loony.
So, Leanne, let's go back to you. And you do have some new reporting about Senator Joe Manchin. He initially planned to break from the president after last week's debate. It's important to point out that he's not a Democrat anymore. He has now registered as an independent. But what prevented Manchin from making this bold statement?
Yeah, well, Senator Manchin, as you well know, Ryan, covering the Hill, has been very critical of the president for quite some time. He has even contemplated launching a third-party bid against the president. And so after the debate, we're told that he just kind of had enough, that he didn't think that President Biden should be the nominee. And so he was going to go out on a Sunday show on Sunday and break with the president in some way and be critical of him. But he received a full court press. Word got out that he was going to do that, and he got lots of calls to walk him off that ledge. He also got a call from Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who Manchin had decided by that time not to be critical and not to go on the Sunday show. But he still did receive a call from Schumer and some other, we're told, prominent